Secretary of State James Cartlidge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I turn to the substance, in responding to my point of order, the Secretary of State said that when he was in opposition, and I quote, "We were not offered a briefing. We had no advance copy of the Defence Review."
Order. Please. It's not been a good day so far, and I don't want to interrupt it anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, and he said this occurred when I was a minister at the MOD. In March 2023, before I became a minister, he was invited to a reading room in the morning of publication. And on the Defence Command Paper Refresh, July 2023, when I was a minister, when he said he didn't get a copy, I can confirm, and happy to substantiate this, a hard copy was dropped off at his office 9:30 a.m. that morning. I asked for a copy repeatedly on Sunday and on Monday, and earlier this morning we weren't given one. I've not even read the document, and I'm the Shadow Secretary of State. What I can add, Mr. Speaker, some of the biggest defence companies in this land were given copies at 8 a.m. this morning.
Shameful.
They've had hours to read it. I haven't read it at all. This is meant to be a democracy. This is meant to be a parliament. How can we hold them to account?
Bye-bye, Luke.
Now, Mr. Speaker, whilst they may have tried to hide the actual document from us for as long as possible today, what they cannot hide is what's happened in plain sight. A total unravelling of their strategic defence review because, quite simply, they haven't got a plan to fund it. An SDR without the funding is an empty wish list. The ships and submarines it talks of, they're a fantasy fleet. The reviewers were clear in the Telegraph today that the commitment to 3%, and I quote, established the affordability of the plan. Now, on Thursday, the Defence Secretary said in an interview with The Times that reaching 3% was a certainty. But by the weekend, he had completely backtracked to 3% being just an ambition. And today, the Prime Minister was unable to give a date by when 3% will be reached. Why? Because the Treasury haven't approved a plan to pay for it. Now, the Secretary of State and I have both been Treasury Ministers and Defence Ministers. He knows as well as I do how this works. For the Treasury to approve a plan, it will have to feature billions of pounds of cuts to existing MOD programmes. And so this SDR has dodged the big decisions on existing capabilities. Can the Secretary of State confirm that the so-called Defence Investment Plan, to be published in the autumn, will set out the cuts needed for the Treasury to agree a plan to get to 3%, details we should have had today in the SDR? Can he also confirm that the total budget for new measures announced in this SDR over the next 5 years is less than £10 billion, less than we'll be spending to lease back our own base on Diego Garcia? Isn't this the hard truth? The government are unable to guarantee the money our armed forces need, but the one plan they can guarantee is the one to give billions to Mauritius for land we currently own freehold. And can he finally tell us what percentage of the payment to Chagos will be met by the MOD? He's never told us before. So let me suggest an alternative path to him, Mr. Speaker. First, guaranteeing to hit 3% and doing so this Parliament, not the next. Secondly, getting a grip on our welfare budget rather than competing with reform to expand it. Thirdly, saving billions by scrapping their crazy Chagos plan. That is a plan to back our armed forces and make our country stronger than the party that actually last spent 3% in 1996. The terrible shame of this SDR unravelling is that this was an extraordinary, well, in between, it was a Labour government that came in 1997. I don't know what they're laughing about. The terrible shame of this SDR unravelling, Mr. Speaker, is that this was an extraordinary opportunity to overhaul our armed forces in a world of growing threats. Only yesterday, we saw the Ukrainians once again demonstrating with their audacious attack on Russian nuclear bombers how profoundly war has changed. And yet, it is true, some of the best long-range, one-way attack drones used in Ukraine have not been built by Ukraine, but by UK defence SMEs. We are actually incredibly well placed to be a leading nation in the development of uncrewed forces. But, Mr. Speaker, how many military drones have the government actually purchased for our own military since the general election? Written answer to me, Mr. Speaker, the answer, not 3,000, not 300, 3. They've purchased 3 reconnaissance drones since the election and not a single one-way attack drone. That's the reality. Because for the past year, the Treasury have used the SDR to effectively put MOD procurement on hold. Absolutely shameful when we need to rearm and pace at scale. But at least the Secretary of State for Defence knows how the rest of the country feels totally let down by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But if there's one capability that matters more than any other, Mr. Speaker, it's people. We agree on the critical importance of recruitment and retention, which is why I did so much of the work to buy back the defence estate so that we can actually rebuild it and rebuild substandard defence accommodation. But the army is down by 1,000 since the election. So if this government really wants to address recruitment and retention, would it not be total madness to scrap the legislation protecting our Northern Ireland veterans from a new era of ambulance-chasing lawfare? Surely, Mr. Speaker, nothing could be more damaging for morale and recruitment and retention than to once again pursue our veterans for the crime of serving this country and keeping us safe from terrorism. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State says he wants to send a strong message to Moscow, but the messages he's sending are profoundly weak. Surrendering our fishing grounds for an EU defence pact that doesn't offer a penny in return. Surrendering the Chagos Islands to the delight of China and Iran, and surrendering our army veterans to the lawyers. To cap it all, and after so much hype, producing a damp squib SDR that is overdue, underfunded and totally underwhelming. Our armed forces deserve a lot better than this.